Kim, do you want to just check for the live? There we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter. It is Easter Monday, and we are coming at you live this morning. And we are all back in our respective postal codes, at least for now. We'll see how much longer that lasts for, because we all like to travel and do our thing. But here we are. And welcome to the Spiritual View. And so I'd love to just check in with both of you to start. How was your weekend? How was your Easter? How are you doing? Sheila, why don't you go first?
So I had a really full weekend. I was teaching a lot of yoga. So I did that. And I also created a new space for my healing room. So that was really powerful. Did some painting and, put up blinds. And yeah, so I had an exciting weekend. Very relaxing, very busy, but still nice and homey for sure.
Awesome. Beautiful. Kim, what about you?
Well, I got back last Wednesday, still a little bit jet lagged, but getting better and feeling good, happy to be home. It's always nice to go away, nice to come back to routine as well. I came back a little inspired to kind of stay focused on a few new habits, and also came back and, much like Sheila, didn't create a new space, but sort of reorganized and cleared my space in preparation for some new creative projects that I'm bringing in. We had a bit of family time over Easter, which was nice to see some of the kids and our grandbaby. And we did a very non-traditional Easter dinner. We ordered Indian food in, and that was our Easter dinner, and it was perfect because I didn't have to cook. So
yeah,
other than that, just relaxing and getting back into routine.
Awesome. Well, you can see, first of all, I'm not where I usually am because Easter Monday and my kids are home. So I'm in my office and I've got this one little part of the window that's not covered with the blind where the sun is I just need an extra half an hour and then I think I can get out of it. But I actually had an interesting Easter weekend. So it was my dad's 70th birthday on Saturday. And just because his birthday is on April 8th, sometimes it's on Easter, sometimes it's not, depending on, where Easter falls. So we got together, had some family dinner, some family drama. So that's always fun because, what's a family dinner if you don't have any family drama? I mean, hey, so there was that. And then had, my kids got up yesterday morning, had their Easter egg hunt. We went over to my mom's for dinner. And so it was a full weekend, especially because I'm in the middle of a launch right now too. So there's lots to do and whatnot. But I have to tell you, I had a bizarre night last night, super bizarre. Now, I'm that type of person that I generally sleep pretty well. I'm not a person that struggles at sleeping. The odd time I might have an issue. And if I have an issue, it's probably because I'm really stressed out or there's something really heavy weighing on my mind. Otherwise, I'm pretty clockwork, pretty consistent. And I know that I dream, but I don't often remember my dreams. I'll wake up in the middle almost and have a snippet, and it feels very vivid or very real at the time. But then when I wake up in the morning, it's and it's gone pretty fast. And if someone were to ask me 2 hours later, well, did you have a dream or a dream about it? I'd be I don't know, But last night was bizarre. So first of all, I tossed and turned all night, and I wasn't upset about anything. So there was none of that stress or anything that would, bother me, but I tossed and turned all night. And part of it was my body temperature, internally, if you would have touched me, I'm fine. But internally, I felt so fucking hot. And I could not get rid of it. And I was peeling off the covers. And my husband's I gotta work tomorrow. But I was so internally hot. It was like a fire. I was just internally hot. And I felt like I was exuding heat. And about 3 a.m., I don't know if you noticed this where you are or not, but we do all live in the same place, but the winds picked up here in my house, and the wind was smashing against the windows in the back of my house, which is also where my bedroom is, so hard that it almost felt like they were going to shatter. It was so strong and so powerful. And then I had this really weird dream. And it was this dream, and it was almost like watching a movie. And it started by me being in this house with my family, but not the house we live in, a house that's not familiar to me at all. And all I could tell about the house was that it was a small house that was built high, if that makes sense, right? Not wide, but high. And there was a group of what felt like children. Like they were kids. They weren't very old, but they basically like broke into our home and killed us, all of us. And I woke up at the moment where I was being attacked, knowing that everybody else in my home had also been killed. And as soon as I had that awareness, then I literally like sat right up in bed. Like it was like and I sat right up and my husband's like, are you okay? And I was like the heavy breathing. And then right away in my head, I was like, we need to get an alarm. We need to get an alarm. We need to get an alarm because we don't have an alarm set up in our house. But it was so bizarre. And I remember it still. It's been sitting with me all morning, which is super weird too. I don't know. I'd love to hear if you have any insight or same experience or anything like that, because I'm still sitting with it like, what just happened?
First of all, I want to comment that the message that came up, we need to get an alarm. We need to get alarm. I think pay attention. Our guides come to us in different ways and different forms and dreams. I mean, that almost suggests to me that there's a opportunity for you to be safe. They always want you to be safe. They always want your environment to be safe. They would never want any harm to come to you. So they're just guiding you along. So really, really what came up strongly when you discussed the story was like, there's an opportunity for you to pay attention, be more awake to what could happen. And not that anything's going to happen, but your guides are there to really offer you that wisdom to keep yourself safe and your family safe.
Mm-hmm.
We pay attention to that stuff. We are open to listening to that stuff. And I think that stuff comes in many, many ways. And for you last night, I mean, I can't speak to for sure what it is. I mean, we're just speculating, of course, but my intuition came so strong when you said, get an alarm. Your guides are offering you wisdom.
Mm.
And the reason it comes in such a scary way is because they need to get your attention.
Yeah.
They're trying to get your attention. So they're offering you the wisdom. The other thing that I have to point out, and I don't know if anyone's seeing this or not, but when you're moving your hands and your head, you are full of light. Your hand is, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm seeing it on the screen.
Yep.
Yeah. Like you see the light shining from your hand.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much light in you that you're so able to receive it. That's what came to mind as well, because, you know, maybe people just say, oh, that's just the light shining or the camera or whatever. But to me, that's a sure sign that your body is full of light. And we discussed that last week about, you know, creating our bodies being more full of light. As we release more of the trauma, we become more of a light body. Your hand is just exuding light. There's so much light. And whether we're just being shown that as an illusion or what it's being shown as, it's definitely something for us to pay attention to. And being full of light means that we have the opportunity to experience life in a really profound way. And it's profound that you got that message.
It is. Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate that insight because I didn't, it's always interesting how it's so much, in my opinion, because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but it almost feels like it's so much easier to interpret things for other people. Right. But then when it's myself, it's like, sometimes I don't see what's like so super obvious. Right. Yeah. Kim, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I've got two, I guess, things I'd like to share. First of all, I too have been having some really bizarre dreams the last couple of nights. Not so much last night, but the night before for sure. But I do remember last night. I can't remember what I was dreaming, but I do remember dreaming, and very much like you, the wind, something startled me awake, and I looked at the clock and it was 3:33. And I actually, when I think about this, I have noticed often in the past when I'm having these bizarre dreams and I wake up, it's always a number like that on the clock, whether it's 2:22 or 3:33. That is something that is consistent with these strange dreams that I have. And I agree with Sheila. I think sometimes our dreams could be our guides giving us information. And I just as you were sharing, I thought about this other perspective, which we talked about briefly just before we jumped on live here, and about how sometimes dreams can maybe be related to past life. Mm-hmm. And when I think back to when I was a kid, for years, like probably until I was a teenager, I would always have this reoccurring dream of getting hit by lightning. And I was terrified of storms. And I would often have this dream, and I would wake up right before being hit by the lightning. But for years and years and years, I had this dream. I don't have it anymore. I haven't had it probably since my teen years. But I also remember previously going through some past life regression where I did discover that was a way that I had died in a past life. So that really made a lot of sense. And I just forgot about that until we started having this conversation.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to have someone who actually is an expert in dream interpretation to come on the show or to hop into the comments and share something, because like Sheila said, we don't know, but there can be so many potential possibilities. And I think the important thing is to explore them because they're happening for a purpose. Mm-hmm. We know that everything is happening for a purpose. Everything's happening for us. So the more that we can rather than just write it off and say that was a crazy dream, I think there's some importance in digging into a little bit and finding out, okay, what is the significance of this? What do I need to learn or do from this?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's also interesting, is it interesting how when we retell a story of an experience we had, we sometimes not intentionally, but we forget pieces of it. Because as you're talking, what I'm also remembering, and I even think when I told you the story before we hopped on the show, I forgot to say this the first time too, is that the entire night I had an intense pain underneath my left shoulder blade. And I would almost, like, from my massage therapy background, if someone came to me, I'd say, well, it's probably a trigger point, right? But it also, like, it was a sharp shooting pain, and it had heat all around it as well. It was almost like the heat was radiating from that point and then moving out of my body. But no matter how I moved my arm, which way, like I did, I couldn't get the pain to release. So finally this morning, the first thing I did when I got up is we have a massage gun. And the first thing I did is I was like, for like, 10 minutes, and it feels way better now. But what I'm also connecting the dots with, and I've learned this in my own training, is about our Akashic records, right? And so our Akashic records are the library, the living library of our soul. It's this energetic record of all of the experiences we've had across all time, space, dimensions, lifetimes, everything, right? And so what can sometimes happen is in our dreams, we start to, we can say, release or process an Akashic record that we've been holding on to that perhaps is anchored in our body. And so sometimes there's a possibility where we can wake up with random pain that doesn't really make much sense. And we might say to ourselves something like, oh, I must have slept funny. Or maybe it's because I was in a different bed, or I was in the wrong position, or whatever that is. And actually, that physical pain that we're experiencing is the energetic release of the collapsing of that record, which is also super fascinating.
As you were sharing that, Tracy, as soon as you said, I was feeling it in the back, I immediately just got this intuitive message that, okay, with it being in the back, that's significant of it being in the past. And it almost felt to me like, two parts, right? The part which Sheila said, that I agree with that the guides are, showing up to give you something. It feels like, this is something that's happened in a past life, but there's something maybe that hasn't been completed, right? So it's showing up, whether it's that lesson to be learned or something to be acknowledged. And that this might be the opportunity to actually, like you said, release that, whether it's some sort of karma or something. But as soon as you said it was in the back, I immediately thought past life.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how we can interpret.
It is. And I love that we're doing this. Like I do anyway, because I'm connecting dots as we're talking. Because the other thing that I thought of too this morning when I was in the shower really quick is when I thought of that pain, because I was moving my arm around a little bit, I was like, what is this? And right away I saw it was like a stabbing, like some kind of like sword or spear or something like that. And as I'm telling you the story this morning, I'm like, oh, so I wonder if that's actually connected to the drama that I alluded to around my family this weekend. I was like, oh, this is actually starting to make a lot of sense. I don't know. Does that make sense to you as well? Or is it just me?
That was the first thing I thought of is, I don't want to speak to your family drama. That's private stuff. But that was the first thing I thought of when you said that the pain in the back and the stabbing in the back. It's an energetic feeling that perhaps your family is stabbing you. I'm just making this up, but when you become a light body, when you become more energetically cleared, as you're obviously doing, those stories no longer hold true. because they don't have any, there's no truth from them, but your body wanted to hold on to the truth of it.
Yeah.
The truth that your family's stabbing you in the back, the family's doing this to me, they're doing that to me. Those become less and less we're less and less able to carry those stories. What starts to happen is you recognize that each member of your family is playing their role. They're playing out their part, and their part has nothing to do with you, in a sense that how they're processing their information and how they're seeing you and how they're viewing you really is their own observation and their own perspective. And how they're observing the world is based on their own ideas and understanding. So for us to take on that as suffering and take on their opinion of us, or to take on their understanding of the world, it doesn't serve. And it's really clear that it's not serving you, because your body has become light. Your body has become energetically cleared. I mean, how long have you spent clearing your energy, Tracy? How long have I spent? Has Kim spent? This is not just something, a one and done experience that we've had. This is like years of exploring and saying, what was that? What was that? And just like we're doing right now, what is that pain in Tracy's shoulder? What was that? And willingness to look at it. What part were you playing in it? It's your part. It's the part that you're playing, that you are setting yourself up to be stabbed in the back. They stabbed me in the back, or whatever it is that you're feeling. So you need to understand, we all need to understand that there's an opportunity in that. It's not that you're weak or you're less than because you did that. It's because you're strong, because you're willing to face it. That you're willing to go look at it and say, wow, what is my part in this? Where do I go with this?
Yeah. And you know, what's interesting, and so I'm going to try and share it in a way that's also respectful, because I don't, there is a privacy there that I don't want to break for anybody else. But my perspective, my experience was, what happened over the weekend was, number one, it was with a family member that it would often be this exchange of sweeping things under the rug and me saying nothing, so that there wasn't conflict created, or so that it wasn't creating a situation for everybody else that was uncomfortable, or where we were, then we weren't speaking, or whatever that was. But what happened this time is, instead of allowing that to happen, I actually came and faced it head on and set some boundaries around it from my perspective, and said, I'm not willing to do this exchange anymore. I'm not willing to play this game. So if we can't do it differently, then we can't actually do it at all. So it was this really interesting experience over the weekend of me. And part of it was putting boundaries in place. Part of it was owning up and taking responsibility and accountability for myself. Part of it was calling someone else on their stuff and saying that, that's not an exchange that I'm willing to tolerate anymore. And what was fascinating is, as I was going through it, and other people were witnessing and watching what was happening, the comment that kept coming to me from people who weren't actually directly involved, that were just watching, is they were like, it was something along the lines of, it's like, wow, like you got a set of balls on you kind of thing, to be willing to shift the trajectory or the dynamic of how I was approaching it, and what I was and was not any longer willing to participate in. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I hear is that you actually just stood in your truth. It doesn't feel like it was something intentional or targeted. You just stood in your truth and spoke your truth. Yeah. And maybe that was, the lesson or something that wasn't learned in the past life. And maybe it was now, and that was the releasing of the karma, like you said. What I love so much about this conversation, take away the detail of it. What's happening here is, and we've all done a lot of work, and we still have a lot of work to do. This is part of life, and we're open, and we've, expanded consciousness. I think we've opened perceptions, but I still think for all of us, it's so easy when something happens. We are still sort of narrow-minded, and we have our own personal perspective on what this is, what it's about. And it's not until we start to engage in conversations and open up to the possibilities where we can see how many potentials or possibilities could be connected to what is happening. Mm-hmm. And I love that, because I think that's the way everything in life should be approached. I mean, we did briefly talk about this before coming on this morning, and all we kind of came up with is, that was so bizarre. That was so bizarre. But until we started talking about it, I mean, all of a sudden things make sense, things make more sense. Yeah. And that's what I'm really loving about this conversation this morning. and thinking about, if we apply that into everything else that happens to us in life, not just our dreams, how we can really become more conscious and aware, and then maybe be able to actually move through it with a lot more truth.
Yeah, I love that. This is actually, so in one of the groups that I belong to, we call, it's called tracking, right? And we actually get together in groups and we work on, it could be one theme or one person's experience that they want to let go of or whatever that is. And we come at it from a place of curiosity and asking all of these questions to find what the root or what resonates in that. And so much information can come forward from that. Like, even as you were saying that, Kim, I was also like sitting there in the realization of, oh, so karmic, yes. And it's also ancestral, because there's a theme of this that actually shows up in my maternal line of how women treat each other, which is super fascinating as well. Yeah.
My understanding of this is so different than it used to be. I used to think, put more love on it. Pray for me to be better. How could I be better? How could I be more loving? How could I be more accepting? And it really came to my spiritual awakening where I saw the misunderstanding in that teaching. Mm-hmm. The teaching is still about love. Spirituality is still all about love and acceptance, but it really requires that we don't accept unkindness. We don't accept abuse in our lives. So if someone is, challenging you and saying, you're like this, you're this way, you're that way, I can respectfully say, I love you. I appreciate your opinion. It is not my opinion. I reject your opinion. And I would prefer, if you have that opinion of me, that we don't spend time together, because there's no value in it for me. For you to continually tell me I'm not good enough, or I'm something that you don't like. So I think my understanding had to shift because my boundaries were so poor. And I would just make exceptions for every unkind act that ever came towards me. And I would just pour more love on it. And I realized that was a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding.
Yeah. I love that, Sheila. And, that kind of brings us, in a bit of a different direction, but coming off of Easter, where a lot of people would have spent time with their families in some way, shape, or form, is that, I don't know about you, but I've had many conversations with, whether it was, friends or family or, clients. And often when we start to talk about boundaries and the kindness aspect, this is kind of where people really struggle. Right? That there's a bit of this story going that because we're family, because we're related, because we're, connected in this way, that I have to have relationships that maybe aren't as serving for me because we're family, because we're, it's like that saying, what's that saying? Like blood is thicker than water or something like that. Have you ever heard that? Yeah. Which is interesting, right? That we're much, not much more, but we may be more willing to set a boundary and some limitations and stand more in our truth in relationships that aren't blood.
And what's interesting, kind of related to that, but off to the side a bit, Dolores Cannon talks about this, and I'm sure others do too, about how the people we're in family with right now in this lifetime, we've often been in family with in past lifetimes too. And I've actually had some clients recently that have gone through some QHHT sessions with me, and it has come up where, the wife in this lifetime was a wife in a past lifetime, and the son's wife is in this lifetime a friend or a cousin. Like it's fascinating. And so again, it makes me think of that whole, whether you want to call it karmic debt or, these unlearned lessons, and having the opportunity, right? And I think that's where we're getting better at seeing things as opportunities. But for a lot of people, I still think they see struggle and challenge as it's targeted, it's victimizing, and it can feel that way. But honestly, and I think I woke up to this before I even got into yoga and that sort of thing. But I've found my greatest teachers have been the people that have challenged me the most or triggered me the most. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we know about the whole mirroring and people showing us, who we want to be, who we don't want to be, both sides of the coin. And when I am feeling challenged or triggered by someone, I really now take the opportunity to look inwards and try to explore that in two ways, right? Okay, what is it that is creating this disturbance in me? And sometimes I'm finding, I actually do the same thing. So then I want to change that. Or I'm realizing, okay, this is not the type of boss or leader I want to be, or this is not the type of, parent or friend that I want to be. So there's so much wisdom when we can explore it, right? But I think so many of us just either brush it off or we really push it away.
Yeah.
And the more we can talk about this and open ourselves up to others' perspectives and views, then we can maybe actually find the nugget, right? Or the wisdom in it. Otherwise, we know it's going to come back and present itself in a similar but different way until we acknowledge and learn it.
Yeah. And much of what I've learned in terms of past lives and the Akashic records is exactly what you're talking about with Dolores Cannon, from the perspective of that none of these relationships are random, right? Like the fact that the three of us are doing this show together, it's not random, right? On a soul level, we were already, we could say, courted or connected or contracted each other for some specific reasons, right? And it's the same thing with our family. Absolutely. Like I've had other lifetimes where my husband and I were married in the exact same roles that we are now. And we've had other lifetimes where we were still together, but in different roles, whether that could have been, parent and child, it could have been siblings, it could have been teacher, student. Like there's so many obviously possibilities, right? And what I've learned in the studies that I've done in terms specifically of reincarnation and past life is that when we talk about karmic balance, we have a bit of a, the right word would be misconstrued understanding of what it is from the perspective of often what you hear, especially in metaphysical communities, we talk about karma is it's that idea, it's like the boomerang effect, right? Like what you put out is what you get back. But then there is that idea behind it, like you talked about victimization or whatever that is, right? And in the work that I've done and what I've studied, karma, that word actually means balance. Right. So it's not about you reap what you sow, you get back what you give, and it becomes a victimization or that there's any ill intent even behind it, but it's rather this idea of it's creating balance in the scales. So, if you had this experience with a person in this lifetime, then you will have the opposite or a different version in another lifetime in order to balance it all out, to bring it to completion, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure about that. Like, I'm not sure that the karma has to be carried out. Like someone does harm to me, then they need to, vice versa. I'm not sure about that. And the only reason I'm not is because I think you can clear it. I think you can clear the karma so that it doesn't have to play out that, because I think that's the dysfunction of karma is do unto others as I've been done to me. So I think, I don't know if that's my opinion. I think my opinion would be different on that. I would say karma is more a state of recognizing what that energy is doing and how it's playing out in your life and releasing it and no longer carrying it forward. Yeah. So if you release it in you, Tracy, if you were to release some family karma, family dysfunction, whatever you want to call it, your children don't have to carry it forward.
I agree.
And it have to be that they do harm to others or someone does harm to them. Like I think it's where they can clear it. You can clear it and it can clear for generations.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Sheila. And so if I maybe change the wording of how I'm trying to experience it, it's maybe a potentiality that the karma can play out that way, if that's what you choose.
It can play out. It'll keep playing out until you face it. I think that's what I see as a healer. Anyone that doesn't want to look at it and doesn't want to, stop it, it'll just keep playing out. And in a simple example is, people come to me because they want to find love. And I was them. I was no different than them. I wanted to find love too. And I kept playing out the same role. if you're not willing to look at what's stopping or bringing in the same person, bringing in the same experience, if you're not finding love, or if you're not getting the experience you want, if you're not willing to look at what that thing is, for instance, this one woman was dating a married man, and the married man was never going to commit to her. She understood this. And I said, so do you want to continue that? Do you want to continue that? Well, I don't see any other way. Well, then that's what you're going to continue to get. That is, there's choices there. We all have choices to release that karma. You don't have to carry that energy of something less than. I mean, not always that you're less than if you're the mistress, but in that situation, she felt she was. So, so that energy is carried forward. So we are patterning ourselves and choosing what we're going to get going forward. Yeah. And we can release it. We can change it.
Yeah. Sheila, I don't know if you remember, we've done a lot of sessions together, Sheila and I, we've had some interesting sessions, but coming back to the releasing of karma, not only for our children, or, future children. I don't know if you remember, Sheila, the karma release between Tristan and I. So my son Tristan died of overdose in 2019. And I mean, now I look back and I know he came into this life to wake me up. I mean, I can go back to when he was 2 and I didn't even know anything about yoga back then. And he used to wake me up by tapping my third eye. And I never thought anything of it. But when I look back, his whole life, he was trying to wake me up. And after he died, I mean, I had 2 choices. I could heal or suffer. And I chose to heal. And through different sessions that Sheila did with me, channeling the guides, there was one particular channel where the guides said that the reason I was where I was, which I say is in a very good place, is the acceptance of my circumstances. I really did come to acceptance of everything that's happened in my life. And then shortly after that, Sheila, I don't know if you remember, I know we have it recorded because we have them all, but Tristan actually came in and he told us that he actually, even in spirit world, had like ascended to a different place. And he was in a new form now because of my acceptance and like releasing this karma. And it was so profound. I don't know if you remember that session at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's not even just for, the children, grandchildren down the road. I mean, it can be for any connection energetically. And that was pretty cool.
That's the importance of this work. This work is often not, people don't understand what we do. A lot of times it's hard to comprehend until you're in that session where Kim is experiencing her son at a new higher form of energy, and she can feel it. I can feel it. There's nothing denying it there. We both understood what was happening, but in that situation, we both got a strong message of the power of us clearing and the power of us living our best lives and living from a place of love. Of pure love. And sometimes pure love means that, like Tracy says, I said to my family member, I matter. That is love of self. I matter. And this is what I need in my life for a loving relationship. Yeah.
That's where love starts, right? Is with self.
Absolutely.
We're taught the opposite. But when you find that, everything changes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, so let me ask you both this question then, because I feel like if I was a listener right now, this would be one question that I would have. So let's chat about this a little bit as we're talking about karma and how to, or not even how, but that we can release it. And so what would you say if I ask you the question, like, what does that look like? How do we release karma? What does that mean? Is there a process? Is there different ways? What are your views on that, Sheila?
I'd say it comes in a million different forms because every client that comes to me, it happens in different ways. And I would say it happens just like it happened to Tracy last night. It happens just like that. Or it happens just like it happened to Kim that day in the channel. But those are 2 totally different experiences. And I'm going to say that the guides and the wisdom of what is beyond us is so much more than we can imagine. They find ways of releasing it and helping us that we can't even comprehend. Like if you were to say to yourself today, well, How would I release that karma? I think I'll take a dream and I'll take, I'll get it in my back. I'll feel the pain in my back. You can't think of it. You can't imagine how it's going to play out. So if people are experiencing things, I would just say, start to trust that those things are happening, and start to trust that there is healing and availability to you beyond what you can even comprehend. I've seen things happen that are they're beyond what I could even tell. Like, I don't even remember how many things I've seen. That's how many I've seen. So none of it I doubt. Sometimes I wonder, but most of it is, yeah, that just happened. Kim just released this karma for her son. She just released it for many generations. Tracy, you just released that karma for whatever that experience was. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Comes in all different forms, as far as I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Kim, what's your thought on that?
I guess if I could say something simple that would be easy for people to remember, it would be, this happens when we let go of resistance and we move towards acceptance. And it's really just the way of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, right? And that was one thing that was so confirmed or validated for me when I was in Thailand and we had the opportunity to spend time at the temples and, a half day with the monk, bringing the teachings forward of the stuff I knew, but really hadn't thought of for years, but made me realize that, okay, this is how I do try to approach life. And it helped me to realize that, yes, this is the right way to actually be more focused and intentional on it. But, we've all heard, I think, that quote, pain is inevitable, suffering is an option, right? And to release ourselves from karma, that's freedom. Freedom is where we don't have suffering. Suffering is always going to come forth, and we have the option to clutch onto it, or to feel it and move away from it. And for me, I think that's the key is, let go. We can't change anything that's happened in the past by trying to control. But when we can move into a place of acceptance, and part of acceptance is understanding what is the purpose, right? Or the opportunity. What is the lesson? How can I think differently about this or respond differently if this were to happen again? And then we can let go and be in that place of acceptance. That frees us to move forward, I think. So those are the two words I would suggest for people to remember is, the letting go of resistance and moving into acceptance. If you're in resistance, you can't be in acceptance. It's just really like the love or fear thing.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you actually touched on suffering, Kim, because that was one of the pieces I was going to go, because based on my description of what happened to me in terms of, not sleeping and the heat and the shoulder blade, someone might easily say, well, that was, you were suffering, even though it was only for a short time. Right. And so I think one of the takeaways I would want to drop in for everybody that listens to this show at any time is that it's not always going to be, nor does it have to be, suffering. Like, sometimes awareness can be the most powerful thing. And as we've talked about today, like, my awareness is coming after the physical release, right? But it's not always like that. Like, sometimes just the awareness can allow us to create that ripple effect. So, if I give that a really tangible example of that, actually on Thursday, I went to do some Easter shopping for my kids. And one of the things that I have been working on a lot for the last, let's say, 5 to 6 months is releasing myself from anywhere and everywhere that I have a story of poverty, anywhere that I'm in lack, anywhere that I'm in scarcity. And I've been really working to expand myself into my own wealth sovereignty, into wealth creation, right? Into what it feels like to always be sufficient and insufficiency, because I personally believe that is our inherent birthright, is that's what we're meant to come into experience. So on Thursday, I went to do some Easter shopping for my kids, and I went to a couple of different places, and I got, the quarter-pound peanut butter cups and the eggies and, all these things and whatever. And I had one last place to go, and it was that I had planned to go in my head, and it was Purdy's chocolates, which everybody in my family loves. And if you don't know what Purdy's chocolates are, they're a little bit more luxury, I guess. Like, they're more expensive, right? It's not like grabbing a chocolate bar off the counter, right? And so usually we only do it kind of like at Christmas and whatever. And so it was my last place to go. And so I'd already spent, I always spend over my, budget. That seems to be how I roll when it's stuff for my kids, which is fine. But I started to have this conversation with myself about like, do they really need those? Like, they're more expensive. They're just kids, do they really deserve them? And I kind of like sat back and I was witnessing and listening to myself have this conversation with myself. And I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like, where does this come from? Like, why would I be having this conversation with myself when the other side of that is I know that it's something that my kids really love and really enjoy? Right. So why would I be kind of stepping into this space of second guessing myself and questioning, like, should I buy them? Do they deserve them? Like, all of this. And then it like hit me. And I remember this childhood memory that I had. And when we would go over to my grandparents, there was always this theme of like, children should be seen and not heard. So they would give us, some chips and a pop, and they would send us into the basement. And it was like, don't come out and don't come up until we call you and it's time for dinner, kind of thing. And I remember always going over there and I would say to my parents, like, one of my, complaints, I guess, as a kid was that I didn't like the pop that they were giving us. They would always buy like no name brand, like Western Family or whatever pop. And to me, it tasted different. And I always said it tasted funny. And I would just prefer to have a Coke or have a whatever, but I didn't like the brand. And I remember these conversations with my mom and her saying things like, you should just be happy for what you get. Be grateful for that you got something, you get what you get, kind of thing. Right. Or she would say, like, oh, you're such a snot. You're being a snob. Why do you think you deserve better than that? You're lucky they got you anything. And I started to kind of track into that and to connect the dots, realizing that was, a event, we could say, that created that belief about what kids do or don't deserve. And I could see from that experience that I was then playing that out now as a parent, right? And then that brought me the opportunity to reprogram, to deprogram that, and to rewrite a new story so that it didn't have to carry forward with my kids to their kids to, and so on down the line. But that was a much easier experience than, let's say, what happened last night, right? Because all it was required was some awareness from me, and then some emotional release and some willingness to rewrite the story and to take a different action, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's interesting because when I listen to that,
yeah,
both sides are right. I mean, right? It's right to be able to have choice and have preference. And at the same time, it's also important to just be grateful. But it's how we communicate that, right? It's either we're taught to teach one or the other. Whereas why can't we say, in this moment, how about we be grateful for what we have, but going forward, we know that we can choose what we prefer, right? Yeah. But we never do that. We never do that. Mm-hmm. I actually would like to share after in our Facebook page, just coming back to the whole part about suffering. There's a great video. I've shared it and watched it for I don't know how many years. It's Dr. Sandra Parker, and I think it's called One Choice, Love or Fear. And she just explains it all so well. So I'm going to post that in our group later. Awesome. And for those that may be new to this whole thinking in this way, it might bring some sense into it. So I'm gonna do that later today when we're done.
Awesome. I'm sure our viewers would love that. I'm excited to see it too. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Any final words, Sheila?
No, I find that it's fascinating. We started with dreams and we end up all over, Yeah. I mean, that's spirituality. It's not linear. It takes us in all different directions. And I think I feel very blessed that I have people like you in my life. And I hope our listeners find that as well, that we have people, that you have us in your life, that we can offer a different perspective, a different way that does sort of really end the suffering. Not that Tracy didn't have discomfort and an uncomfortable night, but that was over in no time. Mm-hmm. If she chose not to hear the message and understand the message, then that suffering would probably continue as we see it, as we believe. And I think the power is in communicating and knowing that as humans, there is a different way of living. There is a new way of understanding that we don't need to suffer the way that we think we do. The suffering comes in a form, and then we move through it. And we say, okay, what is the lesson in this? What is my opportunity to grow? What am I not seeing? Where is it that I'm stuck? And that is the power to look. I have a lot of friends that, when I'm speaking this language and talking about different things with them, they always revert back to So you're saying that I don't value myself, or you're saying that I don't have self-esteem, or those kinds of things. And nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to ever say that I'm less than. And that's not what this work is about. It's not saying you're less than. It's saying that you have these things in your life that determined you to be this way or a certain way. And none of it is about us being less than. The truth is, it's about it that we are greater than, that we can even comprehend. But there's such a story in our society that if we admit something, or if we say that we made a mistake, or if we say that we are that comment makes us feel uncomfortable, or if we say any of these things, that makes us weak, but that actually makes us strong. That makes us strong, and it makes us reliable on our truth and who we are. And that is not less than, it is greater than.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up. Beautiful. Awesome. Any last words, Kim?
No, I just want to, again, pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice, right? And we are the creators of our own suffering, whether we want to believe it or not. I think that's 100% the truth. And I believe our greatest growth comes from our discomfort. And I know for me, moving forward, my intention is to embrace discomforts that show up, because that's where I'm going to grow. That's where I'm going to become a better person.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. As always, I enjoy all of these conversations that I get to have with you too, live or not, because they're always so fun and you never know where you're going to go. So thank you so much to both of you. And thank you to everybody here that is listening. And we're going to, of course, carry this conversation over on our Facebook page. So please head on over there and like and subscribe and all the things. And you can let us know what your views are on today's episode, whether that's about dreams or whether that's about suffering or karma or whatever it is. Let's keep the conversation going, because all views are important on the spiritual view. And if you would like to join us as a guest, please reach out and message us, and we can send you the application form and we can get you on the show, because that would be fun too. So we're sending you all so much love. Happy Easter, everyone. And we will talk to you next week at 9